Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There it is, so you don't miss any of our football content this season. It has been, if I might say, fantastic. Our Week 17 reaction is presented by Uber Eats. Get game day deals all season long on Uber Eats. All right, here we go. Former NFL scout John Middlekauff, he has a podcast, 3 and Out. It was a very busy weekend. Sunday, especially the early window, didn't give us much. But let's start with Minnesota 27, Green Bay 25. So I had a conversation yesterday with a general manager in the league who said, "Yeah, you can forget Sam Darnold at $40 million." He said, "You're not getting Sam Darnold at $40 million. Sam's moved into the 5-0, 5-1. And I watched him today, even after his pick, 5 for 5, 55 yards, touchdown. Final drive, he got a little bit lucky. Some play calling, let's just be honest here. Kevin O'Connell's development and play calling is substantial. And between Jefferson, Addison, and Naylor, the Michigan State kid, they have an incredible wide receiving group. Yeah. So I'm not taking anything away. But Sam, here's the thing I take away, John, and you as a former scout, they're asking him to make big boy throws. Some of this shit, these are hard. Even when they were leading late in the fourth, I'm like, guys, screen passes, lighten up. They're asking Sam, this is not dink and dunk. These are tough throws.
Yeah, I mean, he's treating this guy like Mahomes meets Joe Montana in terms of his play calling. Complete trust. I mean, honestly, you remove 2 throws, the interception where he got greedy, and the throw toward the end of the game that he airmailed Addison that could have been a disaster. He was as good as a Josh Allen, Mahomes, Lamar. I mean, that's a dominant performance. I thought, given the hype in this game and the pressure, and we know Minnesota's got to be one of the better home field advantages, how
maybe
loud it is. Sometimes you can be overjuiced. To go 17 of 22 in the first half and just slice and dice this team, you know what I had to do immediately? I had to Google Jordan Love's contract because I'm thinking, and listen, Jordan Love, for whatever reason, for a good player, he is a slow starter in these games. But I Googled, he got a $75 million signing bonus and $160 million guaranteed. And if I'm Sam Darnold and we beat Detroit next week and we're the number 1 seed, I don't see how you could take anything less than that. It's like, because Jordan Love got paid really off 8 games. Remember, the first half of the season, he was atrocious. And obviously he had been there longer and they liked him and they know him. But every time I hear Kevin O'Connell talk about Sam Darnold, it's like the way I hear Andy talk about Mahomes. I mean, they love the guy. And listen, they didn't. This is not a clunky Atlanta Falcons situation. This was good business. They paid a guy $10 million, and they drafted a guy who essentially fell into their lap that they liked as well, J.J. McCarthy. Things changed throughout the course of the year. This is not a 35-year-old striking oil late in his career, right? This is not a Geno Smith situation. 27 years old. He was one of the younger players to come in the league, right, when he was drafted. Today was, and they've been doing this all season. I was like, it's not like they've peaking. They were blowing out teams immediately. The Giants, they destroyed the 49ers, they destroyed the Texans, and in their 4th game, they were up 28-0 on this Packer team in Green Bay. And the Green Bay came back, but they've been dominating start to finish with him at quarterback.
Look at the 2018 draft class. Baker, Darnold, Josh Allen, Lamar, all having their best years.
What a class.
And it's funny. Like, we used to always talk about the Marino and Elway class. We've had 2 classes now that have been like 4-star quarterbacks out of it. And it's funny, John, because in baseball, we understand even if you're Bryce Harper, you go to the minors and it takes a while to get it going. In the NBA, even if you're Giannis, it takes 3 to 4 years to build into something. But in the NFL, we figure, well, you're 22, you went to college, but it's very similar. If you don't get a good fit, I mean, Mahomes didn't play his first year. Josh Allen was rough his first year. And if you go to a bad organization, I mean, so it's like you look at Sam now, you're like, Sam has 4 to 5 more minimum peak years. Here's the other thing. I'm never going to talk about a guy's money, right? But if you could take a little less to stay with Minnesota, even though they have J. McCarthy in the offing, it's weird. I mean, listen, again, if somebody offers you 52 and, I'm Minnesota, I don't let him go. I think you and I agree. I'm not letting him go. Yeah. But if he goes to the market and somebody offers 51, but it's like the Raiders, or you can go to a place that's got better players and better personnel. Because I think what Sam has learned is wow, coaching and weapons really matter, really matter. Because I think, I mean, we can talk about Justin Jefferson, but hell, Naylor today, TJ Hawkinson, the run game, Addison, Kevin O'Connell. You know, we haven't talked about this. Is Kevin O'Connell the coach of the year?
I'm sure we'll talk about Harbaugh a little bit later, but to me, it's Kevin O'Connell or Jim Harbaugh. I mean, Jim Harbaugh took over a 5-win team. Kevin O'Connell, they started slow last year, but before Cousins tore his Achilles, they were really coming on. And 2 years ago, if memory serves me correct, I think they were the 2 seed. Now they lost to the Giants in the first round, but this team has been good for a couple years. This is the best version of it. But, I always say about play callers, certain people in any industry, obviously you get better at whatever you're doing with reps and experience, but certain people are just there's like an innate quality to them at what they're doing immediately. McVay, Kyle Shanahan, LaFleur, you could just see it. We see some of these guys become play callers, and you're like, yeah, this is just not going to work. Not because if you got them on a whiteboard, they would know any less than Kevin O'Connell, but the flow of a game, maybe they freak out, maybe they get stressed, maybe they lose it, whatever it is. It was like he would call the screen at the perfect time. He would call a perfect zone beating route in the perfect time. And obviously him and the quarterback, I don't see how you could ever pivot off when you're a play caller and you get a quarterback who's young and has these physical skills and it's working with your weapons who are all under contract, why you would want to mess with that just because you drafted a quarterback.
I
Who
thought
cares?
the play call of the game, it was 27-25. Minnesota needed 2 first downs to win the game. And the very first play, no defensive coach is calling this. The very first play was a bootleg first down pass. It was like a bootleg screen to the fullback. Yeah. And there's not a defensive coach in the world that's calling that. Because you're thinking to yourself, keep it on the ground, eat the clock, get a first down. He goes bootleg and picks a first down up on the first play, which doesn't eat clock. But what it did, it set the tone. And by the way, that's the play they used on the other side to get the game clinching first down. But and I love LaFleur, but boy, early in this game when they dug a hole, he was really leaning on the run game on early downs. And again, I think we both like LaFleur, but I think maybe because he was a quarterback, I think Kevin O'Connell would rather throw. And I think Matt LaFleur's DNA, he would rather run. And I thought in the first half, you saw a little bit of that.
Yeah, I think Kevin O'Connell's drawn more to Sean McVay. We're at their core that they do like slinging it around. And I think LaFleur at his core is more drawn toward Kyle and his dad. Where in this game, on the road, we want to come out and establish we're tougher than you. And the one thing is this Vikings team is really, really tough. And I don't know if their personnel is great on defense, but their fundamentals in terms of you're not getting guys out of gaps, running the wrong way. Flores is, what him and Fangio have done to their units this year have just been dominant start to finish. And I think, listen, I appreciate, because I've watched Kyle win some big games by leaning on the opponent. Because when you can run the ball, you slow down the game and take the crowd out of it a little bit. So listen, it's happened to LaFleur before as the Green Bay Packer coach. Kyle kind of did that essentially, in Green Bay in that cold game, in the playoffs a couple years ago, where it's just like slow the game down, keep it a lower scoring game. Watson's out. We're not looking for a shootout. Josh Jacobs is a tight back where I bet their game plan coming in was, hey, like 120 yards on like 30 carries. And we just control the time of possession because we're not going to be able to cover these guys. Those two, Justin Jefferson is, as talented as of a wide receiver as there's been of my adult life. Obviously the Randy Mosses, there's some all-time great, but his physical toolbox of deep speed, break tackles, he were lower his shoulder on defenders, one-handed catches. He's a total package. And then Jordan Addison was a first-round pick who USC once upon a time gave $1 million to transfer. That's a big-time player. So I think that they knew that was a little disadvantage to them. We can't get in a shootout, even though the Packers can against some teams. So they tried to slow the game, and it
Yep.
blew up in their face because they couldn't. They just weren't explosive on the ground. And I mean, Sam Darnold looked. I can't get over. Like, it's just every single week he answers the bell. Like, there's no more even conversation to have. It's just, how are you going to approach it? Are you going to franchise him and then try to get the deal done? Well, that screws you a little bit because you can't. That takes up a lot of your
Yeah.
cap space, so you can't sign other guys. I think by the combine they might have a deal worked out. I don't know what else there is to see at this
Yeah.
point
I
in
mean, he
time.
really gives you size, arm, um, playmaking. I think the year in San Francisco, cognitively, I think he's better above the shoulders. He can still be a tad
I agree.
reckless. I don't think he's naturally accurate like Burrow, but he's accurate he's actually strangely. I don't know if you've noticed this. He's almost more accurate on like a 25-yard seam route than a 6-yard swing pass. he,
Total. Well, throws it
yes,
behind guys, and in a zone 30 yards down the field, he just throws
dart.
a dart.
He is better. His fastball is better than his off-speed stuff. When you're asking Sam, who's hyper aggressive, to throw a little lob out 12 yards, like that's the stuff where it gets a little dicey. But you ask him to throw that ball down the middle of the field, dude. He has got a rope.
One thing that really jumps out is some guys, they'll just play very conservative what the game plan gives you. Like they won't try to push the envelope, even good players. Jared Goff can play like this, and it works. And Jordan Love operates like this a lot of the time. This guy comes out like early Mahomes or like Favre, where it could get you in trouble too, but he is looking to throw 50-yard bombs. And every time you watch them play, regardless of the opponent, it feels like they take a legit shot minimum
Yeah.
once a quarter, sometimes more. And I'm not talking 20 yards. I'm talking he is letting it
Yes.
rip.
And
And that is, and clearly him and the coach, and obviously their weapons, it all kind of works. Like you said, because the coach wants to throw
yes,
bombs.
there's a certain symmetry with Kevin O'Connell's DNA and Sam's ability.
For sure.
You don't. And I do hope Brian Flores gets a head job because I really think he is taking, I think it's fairly average personnel and he's making it a B plus
For sure.
defense and it's probably C plus personnel, most of their talents on the offensive side. Well, it's the most wonderful time of the year for getting in on all the basketball, football, hockey action at DraftKings Sportsbook. It's the season of giving, so we're being gifted college football and basketball, pro football, basketball, pro hockey to almost 24/7. It's an absolutely great time of the year. So a lot of games every day, so many opportunities to place your first bet. Now, if you're going to bet for the first time, just make it simple. Pick a team to win, any team. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook. They have an app. Download it in 90 seconds. Here's the gift for all new customers. Bet $5, just $5. If your bet wins, you get $150 in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. The code is Colin, Colin. New customers, $150 in bonus bets if you bet $5 and it wins. Happy holidays from DraftKings. The crown is yours. So we're going to go in a different order today. We're going to go back to a Saturday game because we're going to talk some Cam Ward. We'll get to the Jets Bills. We'll get to a lot of games, but it was a pretty light Sunday menu because of all the games on Saturday. So I want to talk New England getting thumped by the Chargers Saturday 40-7 because we'll get into the Harbaugh stuff. I want to start with New England. So the Boston media is a bit spoiled with the Celtics' success, years of great Red Sox teams, and the Patriots' 20-year dynasty. So they want to get rid of Gerard Mayo. But Dan Campbell went 3-13-1 his first year. And then he went 1-6 to start his second year. This shit's hard. And Elliott Wolf is the VP in terms of personnel. They want him out. Well, he got the quarterback. Like Drake May can play. Now, I don't think at this point, remember, we had real reservations about Dan Campbell. The kneecap press conference, he came across as Fred Flintstone. But in the end, he found a really sharp connective tissue to the quarterback named Ben Johnson. So it works for him. If he doesn't have Ben Johnson, it may not feel the same. And we still think he takes too many risks in big spots. But my take is New England now has the number one draft pick, and they have their quarterback. So they could move down to 5 or 6 and get a Travis Hunter level player. They could get 2 first-round picks, 2 seconds. And my take is, I think we're forgetting. We're not talking Jim Harbaugh. We didn't expect that. But if you look at a lot of these coaches who turn things around, that first year is not always Urban Meyer and Bill Parcells. I don't think Gerard Mayo is who I would have hired. Can I not argue? They got the quarterback. They're number one. Josh Allen's going to own this damn division as long as he's in his prime. Don't run through coaches because you can't beat Josh Allen. You're not going to. Brady owned the division. Marino. I mean, most great quarterbacks, Mahomes owns the division. Or are you it just doesn't look like it works, let's go get the right guy?
I think after watching yesterday and the way they were terrible last year. They had the third overall pick, and they're worse this year. And his unit, the defense, like he was quote unquote the defensive coordinator. They were good last year. They're atrocious this year. Turns out, well, Bill's kind of his baby,
Right.
right? So now it looks like how much with Bill. The other thing is the Dan Campbell comparison. Dan had been an assistant for a long time, post player. He had been an interim coach for a brief stint with Miami. Then he became Sean Payton's right-hand guy. This guy wasn't an assistant coach long. Him and Antonio Pierce, I have no issue with former players, jumping people in the ring to become position coaches, coordinators, or whatever. But like that is pretty valuable. This guy hasn't been a coach very long. So you're watching him, you're like, who would you rather have next year, Mike Vrabel or Gerard Mayo? And some of the press conferences, the whole situation's been clunky. The reporting coming out of Boston about the interview process last year when he was interviewing assistants, it's been weird. They showed a graphic yesterday as they're getting their ass kicked of the Ladd McConkey trade, how the Chargers came up a couple spots to get Ladd McConkey. They took Polk, who all my scouting buddies called the third best receiver on the Washington team, McMillan, who's having a solid rookie season for Tampa. He's got 12 catches. And it's just, you watch this team and you go, this is really, really bad. And it's like last year, I was like, okay, Mac Jones is an atrocious player. Now you got Drake May, and who's talented, but the games are just like him and Caleb playing just meaningless games. Even their passes are just in meaningless situations. You watch Bo Nix playing in real games. I'm watching the Patriots. I personally, if Mike Vrabel wants it, he got inducted last year into the Hall of Fame. Obviously, he's a major piece of the Patriots story and proving that he could coach. I wouldn't even hesitate doing that if he was interested. It's been reported he's interested.
By the way, it's a better job than Chicago or the Jets. If I got Robert Kraft and Drake May, that's a better job than the Jets in Chicago if you consider all the politics. And another thing, it's familiar. Bob Kraft loves you. Stephen Kraft. So I will argue, you probably changed my mind on that. I will say this because it's funny. I know
that was really bad.
I
yesterday.
watched.
I mean, fans leaving, and it's not like the Chargers. This isn't the 07 Patriots coming in with Jim Harbaugh. I mean, they're solid and they might compete in a playoff game, but they shouldn't be beating anyone 40-7 on the road.
I was thinking about this with Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey of the Chargers coming in and dominating. When you're at Georgia, every day at practice, the tight end faces first-round safeties, and Ladd McConkey faced first-round NFL corners. It's not a coincidence that Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers walk into this league. They look like 8-year veterans because the last 3 years, 4 years, they've been at practice at Georgia. It's why I've always had misgivings about drafting guys from smaller schools. An SEC guy, Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, these Ohio State corners, Caleb Downs is facing these receivers, the best players in the country every day at practice. And, like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Stingley's on that team. I mean, these guys are going up against each other every day in practice. But I think what's amazing about Harbaugh, not only did he take the same defense and make it number one in the league, and it was atrocious last year, but Quentin Johnston's fascinating because Telesco just thought they needed to move off. Eventually, they would move off Mike Williams. They knew it because Mike couldn't stay healthy. They wanted Mike's prototype, a big, strong, long. And he was a bust last year. I mean, could not get on the field, forget targets. And he's been inconsistent this year. But about every other game, this game, McConkey had 8 catches, he had 6. About every other game with Quentin Johnston, who was a bust coming into this year, he's a really valuable player. And I think it's not just wins and losses, John. A really good coach squeezes all the juice out of a player. Quentin Johnston probably will never be a first-round NFL talent or first-round productive. But about every other game now, you look up and you're like, boy, he's a different body type. His ability, I mean, Derwin James is good regardless of the coach. McConkey would have succeeded, but it's not just winning and toughness. I think the really good coaches, I mean, Kevin O'Connell and Darnold, they just get more out of each individual player. There's not a single Charger this year that is not playing better than last year individually.
Yeah, I think, did a podcast last night and I was thinking about Jim Harbaugh, and this solidified it. There's no one else in football. I mean, we'll see what Bill looks like in college, who can just go back and forth and kick everyone's ass. Stanford, they were 1-11. By the end, they're in a BCS game. The 49ers, while he inherited a lot of talent, they were 6-10 with Mike Singletary. And I know those guys that cover that team really well. And Matt Mayoko told me even Jim Tom Sula, and for as ugly as the Chip Kelly year, nothing will top that Mike Singletary year. I mean, he was dropping trow at halftime trying to motivate guys. It was a disaster. Immediately 13-3, and they were hosting the NFC Championship game. And if you remember, the White Sox GM Kyle Williams fumbled a punt, or they probably beat the New York Giants and Eli Manning and go play the New England Patriots with Alex Smith as a quarterback, who everyone had written off. And then obviously what he did at Michigan, but then comes to the Chargers. I think the Chargers, even more than the Niners, because they got a bunch of good players, people are like, that's not as hard of a job. That team won 5 games last year and was a
worst team in the league by the end of the year.
And then they get rid of Keenan Allen, who was one of the bright spots. And you know what? And I got talked out of this. I thought, I'm going to make one of the biggest bets in my life on this team making the playoffs. There are 7 spots. You look, the AFC will get weird. Some of these divisions will eat themselves. I think Jim Harbaugh can get to 9 or 10 wins. And everyone, even people in the league, is like, they don't have enough offensive talent. They don't have this. They don't have that. He never has great offensive talent. He runs the ball against the quarterback, and he plays defense, and he's doing the same thing again, and he's going right into the playoffs. And who's going to want to play him in the playoffs? Nobody. Nobody, because he will ugly up the game. What LaFleur tried to do today, he actually can execute that. And so he doesn't win them all, but he can make that game look like
Well,
that.
I mean, at Michigan, the Natty team had one big-time receiver. His Niner teams had Crabtree. This team has McConkey. If you go look at his history, he's never. Stanford was mostly a run game and an Andrew Luck team and a tight end team. Harbaugh, I heard the 2 people I was told, good source inside the building, the 2 players that Harbaugh loved in the first round, Brian Thomas and Joe Alt. They're 2 of the best rookies. It wasn't Roma Dunze. He loved LSU kid. And he loved Joe Alt, and he decided to bookend it with Herbert and say, hey, we got 2 tackles for the next decade. But, people forget about this, the Chargers also got 2 fifth-round corners, one from Maryland. So Jim's going to have, go look at their draft. They didn't miss on anybody. They just went boom, boom. Everybody can play. So, and he's going to have, this is very Pete Carroll out of USC. The next, next 2 drafts, he has an advantage over the league. Now, by about year 4, he's not going to have the same advantage, but it's very Pete Carroll when he came out and he was getting Richard Sherman out of Stanford in the 5th round. Everybody's like, how does Pete know?
He's taken over 2 NFL jobs coming through college. Stanford, where he was in a BCS game, and Michigan, where he won the national championship. The Niners had 6 wins. The Chargers had 5 wins. That's a combined 11 wins. If he wins next week, which I imagine if he plays his starters, he will beat the Raiders. He will have taken a total of 2 teams, 11 wins to 24 wins. More than doubled it. Coming from college twice, 2 different times. He just jumps back and forth. Who could do that?
I think
it's crazy.
There's an argument to be made that if you know how Basketball Hall of Fame takes referees, it takes ambassadors, it takes college pro, it combines everything. If you combine college and pro, Harbaugh and Jimmy Johnson, so Reed and Belichick, because of all their wins, are like the top. You could start making arguments that Jimmy Johnson and Harbaugh are like the only 2 guys ever that were literally elite. Now, Pete Carroll won in both, but Pete's also been fired 3 times in the NFL. And I like Pete, but that's the reality of it. He's always been viewed by my front office friends as a little quirky and different. Harbaugh is A++ college, A++ NFL. And Jimmy Johnson's about the only guy I can ever think of that was both. And it's for years and years I had people in, I know Jim pretty well, and I know people that have been really close with him. Eric Mangini talks about this. So much of what we do for a living and what people do for a living, and I've told my kids this before, how badly do you want it? And Eric Mangini has always told me, I've never met a coach who loves football more than Harbaugh. In his vacation, he'll be looking up old NFL rules that literally we saw it this year right before halftime when they kicked that field goal against Denver, is that he loves football. He's not going to golf or go to a water park. I mean, I'm sure he's a great dad and a husband, but he has such a zeal for it. And it's really, and that's the difference. He is one of those guys. There's everything. He likes the aura, the essence, the power, the physicality, the schemes. And he'll sit in meeting rooms for hours and try to make his assistants and coordinators figure out the Rubik's Cube. And he loves sitting in there. And he's just an advertisement in any business. If you want it bad enough and if you love it enough, you will just succeed. It doesn't matter where you went to college. It doesn't matter the criticism. Willful, passion, and everybody I know that's ever worked with him is like, this dude, it's just the hobbies, they don't know what they are. It's football.
Well, and the other thing is, and I get asked a lot of, just get DMs on Instagram, people asking questions, and someone said, I'm a big Charger fan, and there's always been this narrative around Jim that he rubs people the wrong way, and he has a shelf life. And I think at Stanford, I think that mentality was a lot for people. With the 49ers, it definitely was, and he butted heads with the owner. I think the guy, and you and I have been talking about, is a different human being than that guy. Much lighter with still the same drive. Like Andy is a very light. He's not like just what Jim was at that, but he's very football intense. When you talk about the way you describe, I didn't ever worked with Jim. I would describe Andy Reid that way. His love and passion and unwillingness to just slow down when it comes to football. Vacation, off season, and I've heard since he's been winning Super Bowls, you wouldn't notice any difference. You'll drive by his car's in the office on Saturday, just doing some miscellaneous shit on an April day, 3 weeks before the draft when they have 3 picks.
Right.
It's just his pure passion. And I'm sure you give this advice. Anytime that passion, you can turn it into something you can monetize as a profession, you are much more inclined to be successful. But I do think Jim had to learn to relax a little bit as the head honcho, as the guy top of the org chart. And I think he clearly has. And I think it shows. And this is the worst his team's going to be. Right. And I'd say the same thing for Sean Payton in Denver. Like both those two teams are going to get better. Like the version of the Chiefs, and they're going to maintain being good because they really know what they're doing. But it's hard. I mean, they got to fit around some money. Like this is the worst those two teams are going to be. Now, Herbert is a much better player than Bo Nix right now. So I would just say, like, I think the Chargers are going to be better next year. And like you said, he knows the draft really well. There'll be players, Nico Collins. I remember last year, it's like, who is this guy? He's like, played at Michigan. I'm like, I watched it. You don't even realize he has wide receivers in college that will play for him. Like, I didn't quite realize that guy was there because he doesn't even use them. I mean, that's how it's always been.
So 40-7, Chargers hammer New England. Okay, Bills 40, Jets 14. Jets had 16 penalties. It's over. So I will say this about Buffalo. I think these are the Sean McDermott playoffs. So Josh Allen, I looked it up today, in 10 playoff games, has a passer rating of 100, 21 touchdowns, 4 picks. This is not a Lamar Jackson situation. He has been a B+ to A- quarterback in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And again, I don't expect you to be as good as you are in the regular season because you're not playing Carolina and you're not playing shitty teams. So if you're a 100 passer rating quarterback in the playoffs, that's exceptional. And Lamar has gotten tight. Like you can see it. He's tight. That's not Josh. Josh has been excellent. If they get bounced early in the playoffs, and I know this sounds crazy, and I like Sean McDermott, but John, if they lost, if Cincinnati got in and played Buffalo in the first round and Cincinnati won, I'm telling you, I think McDermott's in trouble. Because when I watch this team, I don't want to hear about Josh Allen. Okay, this is not a Josh Allen referendum. He lost a game because he scored a touchdown with 13 seconds left in Mahomes. He's been fine in the playoffs. This team, this coaching staff has real pressure on it. I mean, think about this. Harbaugh's not going to get fired if they lose in the playoffs. Andy's not. I mean, think of a coach that would get
Harbaugh,
LaFleur safe.
Jim or John.
You know, I mean, Sirianni, real pressure. Sean McDermott, real pressure. I am fascinated to watch Buffalo. They have to, at minimum, get to the conference championship. At minimum, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, well, they're going to be more than likely. I think Denver's going to win next week if Andy rests everybody, and it's a kitchen sink game for them. They would be a huge favorite in that game. I mean, we're talking touchdown plus, maybe 8-9 points. I'm pretty confident Buffalo wins that game. The next game, though, it gets real. I mean, you're playing Baltimore, who feels like they're really coming on. I don't know what Baltimore did. Their defense looks better. That would be a make or breaker, because then if you win that game, all of a sudden you'd have a lot of momentum going into Kansas City, right? And you beat them already this year. So I think it could go one of two ways. I think they're winning week one, or, you know, that first in Buffalo, no matter what. I'd have a hard time. But that week 2 game against Baltimore is a massive
That's going
game.
to be.
Because I would say this: if they go to Kansas City and they have another one of those, and listen, he's had some weird moments with clock management. If it feels like he blows a game, maybe. But if you get beat, it's like some people just couldn't beat Michael Jordan. Some people just couldn't beat Tiger Woods. I think losing to Baltimore, you already lost to him this season. You get him at home in the second round. I think you got to be in the conference championship game. I think you can lose to the Chiefs and keep your head high, even though it would start to feel like, are we just always going to be second fiddle? Are us in Baltimore just always going to be second? And the fact is, you might. You know, that was kind of like Pittsburgh and some of these other teams to Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. You just play for second in your conference. But I think they'd have to win that game, or else it could be weird. Because, and listen, I think it's hard. I mean, what do you even make of the Jets? The Jets are a joke. I mean, and listen, I give the Bills credit. It was a little weird early, and then it was 40-0. And it was like, okay, you guys are just toying with them.
We learned this. Matt Eberflus and Robert Saleh got fired, and their teams got worse. So I always believe, be very careful about firing a coach in season, because if the interim coach wins, you get fan and player pressure to hire an interim coach. And if he loses, then you lose the locker room. So they're 2-9 since Robert Saleh left. But I have always felt that Saleh wasn't the problem. There's an argument he was not the solution, but I never thought he was the problem.
But really quick before the Jets, on the Bills, if you and I own the team and we were sitting down, like going into the playoffs, like what are our different options if things go south? Our division is a disaster. The Jets couldn't be any more of a laughingstock. The Patriots are not even a year away from being a year away from winning 9 games. And the Dolphins, I mean, I just don't really take the franchise seriously, and we own them. So it's like, now, you know, trying to go from really good to great, totally admire anyone who's willing to do that, but it is a pretty risky proposition. Now, if that job became open, everyone and their mother would be calling them. But I just think that, like, you do have a pretty good thing going. And to me, especially if you lose the Chiefs, you're going to keep winning 12, 13 games every year in this division. And you know you have a capable guy. I'm just saying it's pretty risky.
I get it.
You know, do you just stay? Do you ride the course a little bit, because the Jets could go backwards from here, and the Patriots could be stuck here for a couple of years.
No, I think it's.
So that's something you got to take into account.
I'm not saying I'd fire Sean McDermott, but I do believe the pressure is on Sean McDermott, not.
I agree.
Whereas in Baltimore, the pressure's on Lamar. John Harbaugh's got a ring. The pressure with Joe Flacco, Lamar needs to play better. That's indisputable. He's got to play better. Josh has played very well in most spots.
I would agree, but that organization, I think most people would choose the Ravens roster over the Bills roster. I think there's going to be that game. I mean, we have to play it out to look at all the different games. That's got to be one of the better playoff games of the entire tournament, right? If I tell you Ravens and Bills, what's on the line for those two guys, it doesn't. I mean, that's Saturday or Sunday night, week 2, right? That's as good as it gets.
One thing on the Jets, Aaron, 12 completions, 2 picks. He's about the 15th or 16th best quarterback probably in the league now. Maybe 13th, 12th. It's interesting this week, though, and Eric Mangini pointed this out to me on television, that when Aaron referenced Woody Johnson's kids, I've never been fired by a teenager, it was almost as if Aaron was saying, I want out of here. And I do think, I'll say this, Russell may leave Pittsburgh, don't know if he will. Kirk Cousins could be on the market, probably will. I think Aaron's got about a two-team market. I could see the Raiders because they won again today. I could see the Raiders if they're like, we're not going to move up for Cam or Shedeur. We're just not going to move up. I could see them going with like a Kirk Cousins or an Aaron Rodgers for a year. I really could for 1 year.
Yeah, when I saw the story today that Rap Sheet said that Garrett Wilson has basically let it be known if this guy comes back, I'm going to want out. I was dominating, and then you begged for your friend to come here, and then I just became kind of irrelevant. And we know how wide receivers can kind of turn into divas that way. So that's gotten weird. And I would choose a young Garrett Wilson over a 41-year-old Netflix star at this point in time. So I think this Rodgers.
Who would you hire as a coach?
Like, I mean, to me, Ben Johnson would be obviously a guy you'd interview just because, and I'm always hesitant with these coordinators, but there have been enough coordinators excel on the offensive side of the ball, and he's been so good that he's, to me, him and Vrabel. I mean, now that Bill Belichick would have been a guy I would have hired if I were all these teams, but I think those are the two guys. Who else are you really option? Now, we got a curveball here because, and I know he got his ass kicked today, but, CeeDee Lamb was out. McCarthy, these teams are going to want to talk to Mike McCarthy. So Jerry has played this out like, yeah, we'll just date a little bit more before we really get married. And turns out like Mike's actually helped himself out. So like if Mike McCarthy's available, I know the Jets could do way worse than just to get a grown-up, a guy that knows what he's doing and would be guaranteed to just get the train back on the tracks. So like to me, McCarthy is an intriguing option. If he goes, Jerry goes, I want to bring you back. And what if Mike goes, I want to talk to some other people as well, as you kind of played me out and I worked my ass off and worked with these quarterbacks. So you have to wonder if Mike, by week one of the Black Friday setup, like, is it Mike McCarthy's meeting with two teams? Like, is that possible while he's still dealing with the Cowboys?
Keep
an eye on that. I think that's happening.
I said this last week. If you flip the telescope on Mike McCarthy, he gets older, stubborn, rigid Brett Favre. 2 years, goes 13-3, NFC Championship. Wins a Super Bowl with Aaron. We now discover that Aaron's difficult to coach. Both LaFleur and Robert Saleh discovered that, and Mike McCarthy, 3 for 3. He then goes, not only wins 12 games a year with the best B-plus quarterback in the league in an O-line rebuild, Dak, he's winning with Cooper Rush. And so it's like at some point, he won with Favre. He won with the Southern guy. He won with the prickly, passive-aggressive Cali guy. He won with a guy that is kind of an overpaid B-plus guy, Dak. He's now winning with a backup. You say what you want about Mike McCarthy. He's won with everybody. And all his quarterbacks put up their best records and their best numbers with him. So I know I always said this. Aaron was this good-looking, cool guy in Green Bay, and Mike looked like a Milwaukee cop. And just the aesthetic of it, sometimes Mike came across as sort of, unsophisticated, little heavy, and Aaron was the hip coolster on TV. And I think that played into it, that Mike was sort of marginalized. But we have to be fair about this. Every quarterback that plays with Mike McCarthy flourishes. All of them. Cooper Rush, Dak, Favre, Aaron, all of them flourish. And so, to your point, I think he'll have options.
And he's calling the plays. So it's not like, well, he's like Tomlin or Dan Campbell or Sirianni. He's rallying the troops. No, like he's the guy in the meeting with the quarterback calling the plays from the sideline. So he brings a value. So it's like, wait, he can lead the organization. He can handle crazy shit because, like you said, the end of Aaron. But the last couple of years of Jerry could not. I mean, he's dealing with Jerry Jones in his 80s. And then once he got rid of Kellen Moore, I think people thought, did he lose his touch at the end of Green Bay? You watched last year, Dak had the best year of his career. And then this fight, I mean, if the guy doesn't screw up against the Bengals on Monday Night Football touching that ball, he would have won 5 straight games with Cooper Rush. So I think Mike McCarthy, if you removed the day, which I think it's fair to say if you just took every team in the NFL and nobody had a quarterback and everyone got the same quarterback, you might choose the Eagles team, right? If every quarterback was the same, the Eagles probably had the best team. Like it was bound to happen to them. They were missing a couple players and they got run, but I think what else is Jerry going to do? Like, is Jerry going to hire someone else? I think he's going to want McCarthy back, but I do wonder if someone plays you a little bit in business and you got some leverage. I could see Mike screwing with him back a little bit.
It's time to look at this weekend's tastiest matchup in this week's Sunday Night Foodball, brought to you by Uber Eats. All right, so the Bengals beat the Broncos 30-24. Bo Nix 1-6 in one possession games. Rookie quarterbacks, as you'd suspect, aren't going to beat Joe Burrow in games like that. So Burrow's the only great quarterback in the league that may not make the playoffs, and he's freaking on fire. And I mean, they had 500 total yards, 34 first downs. And by the way, Bo Nix didn't play well. 24-31, 311 yards, 7 rushes. He looked so average compared to Burrow.
Yeah.
I mean, a couple plays, Bo, like he threw a ball. He should have thrown it into the dirt. He threw it to his running back who got smoked. Some of that stuff is just the NFL. Some stuff just doesn't work that worked your entire college career. Like you can see sometimes he'll make a throw and you're like, yeah, that's not going to work here. And I think Bo Nix tends to get locked into his number one receiver and he's going to force the ball. But 24 for 31 in every decade is good quarterback play. I'm not saying MVP, but now that Herbert has a legit coach, if I said to you, these are the 5 best quarterbacks in the world: Mahomes, Burrow, Lamar, Herbert, Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, Burrow, Herbert. If I just said, you get 5 in the world, those are my 5. Are they yours?
Yeah, I mean, there's not anyone in the NFL that wouldn't pick those 5. They have clearly separated. And the crazy thing is that if you were picking quarterbacks, we wouldn't even get to the NFC after 5 picks. And these guys, like, listen, Bo Nix, he hit the awesome deep bomb for 70 yards, and he hit the incredible 4th down play. But for the most part, they weren't sustaining drives. It was bad. And Burrow is playing, I mean, it's as good of quarterback play as you can have. Now, he's got Jamar Chase.
But their O-line is bottom 10 in the league, easily.
You know who he reminds me of? You watch, like, Sam plays more like Josh and Mahomes, where they are quick to scramble to throw. Joe Burrow actually plays a lot more like Andrew Luck, where part of the reason he gets hit a lot is he stays in the pocket till the last possible. It's a very old school characteristic. Phillip Rivers used to play like this. Now, he didn't have the arm of those guys, but they would wait for the last second to get their guy that extra step and throw the ball. Most guys, half the league doesn't want to get touched, so they move because they don't want to get hit. Joe is taking some of these hits because he's an old school pocket quarterback. I mean, Joe Burrow would have thrived in like the 70s. Now, he gets absolutely destroyed. Now, his offensive line's bad, and he holds on to the ball to the last possible second, which I admire. But the way he's played this year, and listen, they're going to come up short because I even saw that I think the Dolphins, if Denver were to lose and the Dolphins win, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure they would be in, so they need the Dolphins to lose too. They lost a game, Colin, where he threw 5 touchdowns against the Ravens the first time they played him, where they had multiple double-digit leads in the 4th quarter.
They lost to the Patriots in week 1 or they wouldn't be in this position.
So it's like their defense halfway, even yesterday's not great, but it was so bad at points in time earlier this year.
Denver has components to a playoff team, if you think about it. Hall of Fame coach, elite left tackle, best corner arguably in the game, 1 great weapon, and an elite pass rusher. That's mostly, John, the 6 checked boxes. Now, quarterback, Bo is a B to a B minus right now. If this team, if Bo had 1 year in,
I might go C, depending on
C plus.
It stretches. Yeah.
But if you look at what wins in this league, it's basically coach, quarterback, left tackle, 1 to 2 weapons, at least 1 good cover corner. That's why the Rams can't win. The Rams just don't have an elite. The Rams are going to draft a corner 1 or 2. They have to. But when I look at Denver, Cincinnati is 1 great quarterback, a good edge rusher, and 1 great weapon. I don't even know if Zach Taylor's it. I don't like his clock management at the end of the game was atrocious.
It was crazy. I can't believe that he wouldn't kneel the ball. Now, they got screwed when the guy got hurt and they have to blow the timeout and Denver gets it back. But if you just kneel again, you give a rookie quarterback 40 seconds on the road to get into field goal range.
That's no timeout because they would have had
This is not college. Yeah, so it's like here's what I would say about Bo Nix to defend him. of all the rookies, this guy's on the road, Cincinnati, after Christmas, their season's on the line against one of the best players we've seen in recent memory. Like that's a real game. Caleb hasn't played in a real game. They've lost 10 straight games. None of his games matter. Drake May, nothing he does really matters beside their health. So it's like Bo Nix is playing in real series. Like there are real stakes, right? He's playing to get into the playoffs. And like between the Chargers and Denver, would you lean the Chargers are more likely to win a playoff game just because they got a better quarterback?
Yeah, I think. Listen,
in the
Burrow's
playoffs,
the only great quarterback that won't make the playoffs. I think. In fact, I did this, John. Thinking of you, I did this today. So I thought about this is my. I have 7 teams that I would call the trophy class that can get to a Super Bowl. Kansas City, Buffalo, Baltimore, Detroit, Green Bay, Philly, and I put Minnesota in today. Green Bay, Mini, it's doubtful, but I do think, depending on environment, where they're playing, and the matchup, I think there are 3 teams that can win games but are missing something. Chargers, Rams, and potentially Pittsburgh if they got in. Pittsburgh's defense could win a game if they face the right quarterback. Rams are very Puka reliant. And I do feel like the Chargers in the AFC, you got to score 27 points in some of these games. I mean, if J.K. Dobbins isn't available, it gets really limited. And then I think there's 4 or 5 teams that probably can't win a playoff game. Denver or Cincy, Washington, Houston, Atlanta, or Tampa. Tampa maybe, but I just feel like they earn the spot, but I just don't trust them. Any of those you disagree with?
I think Pittsburgh's one and done.
You do?
And especially as it's aiming up, like they're going to play. They play Cincinnati next week. I don't know about you. I like Cincinnati, and then they're going to play Baltimore in the first round. I'm going to take Baltimore. I think they are a shell of what they were when they were 10-3. Injuries. Russell's coming back to earth a little bit. I think Minnesota's pretty real. And we'll see Detroit. Maybe they're a little healthier tomorrow. We'll see who plays. But then they're playing Minnesota next week, which even though it's not like a winner get into the playoffs, to me, if that's for the number 1 seed, I would put that, I'd put that Sunday night over like winner of the division, Seattle Rams. I would go Minnesota to Detroit. I kind of like Minnesota next week, Colin. Especially if Detroit still got injuries. Now, Detroit's offense is still awesome, but defensively, the amount of guys they're missing, if Jared Goff just has an off quarter against the way this Minnesota, plus they get that extra day of rest, if you tell me Minnesota, like to me, Detroit with their injuries, if you told me they were healthy and they had the number 1 seed, I would pick them to win the NFC. But with their injuries, if they're not the number 1 seed, even if they were, I think they could be beat. To me, if Minnesota's the number 1 seed, I think they're favored in every game they play. Whether they play the Eagles, the Packers. The Rams are a good example of last year. Remember how much momentum and how well they were playing going into the playoffs? And we're like, Detroit, this is going to be a tough first-round game. And it was. This team, like them, is winning a bunch of games down the stretch. They look like shit. I mean, and maybe Cooper Kupp's gotten old. Like you said, if Puka doesn't go for 12 and 150, they're just off offensively. Luckily, their defense
let's talk
good.
about that.
But I thought last night,
let's talk about that.
McVay's done an awesome job, but they look, I can't pick them to win a playoff game.
Sunday Night Football, brought to you by Uber Eats, as the official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. They have the best game day deals all season long. Order now for game day. I do, every week. Rams 13, Arizona 9.
I thought they were going to lose. I mean, I had 100% confident Arizona.
They only had 12.
Whether Kyler
they only had 12
ran
first downs. The Rams had 12 first downs. So we talk about this game for a second. So it's really interesting, and I can't quite figure this dilemma out. So generally, I think you'd agree with me. The first half is a coach's half that you put stuff on paper, especially offensive coaches. First 2 series, Kevin O'Connell and Darnold, they're putting stuff on paper. And then in the second half, coaches matter, but you get 12 minutes in the locker room to really talk to your players, and there's only so much you can digest. It's a bit of an adjustment, but a lot of times the better team, the better roster, the deeper roster wins the second half. That's why Philadelphia, so crappy in the first quarter. Yeah. They just roll over. They just got too many good dudes. You got too many players. And you can scheme up. You're not going to beat like Detroit, Kansas City, Baltimore, Buffalo in a short week when you don't get extra days to coach or install things. They're just, you see these teams like Kansas City and Baltimore played 3 games in 11 days. They went 3-0.
Dominated.
You don't have time to coach up your inferior roster. And I look at the Rams, and this is weird. They got time of possession, Arizona 36 minutes, Rams 23, only 12 first downs. I can't figure this out. They are sluggish in every first half. And I watched this game, and it was almost like Stafford's not warm. Like he looks old. And then in the second half, it's almost like he's a pitcher that he needs to get to the sixth inning. But as I watch him, I'm like, in the second half, he's more fluid, he's looser, he's letting it rip. But I think I can't blame McVay. They're healthy offensively. John, Puka, Tyler Higbee, Kyron Williams, O-line's above average. I think some of it is I think Stafford looks old in first halves.
Yeah, well, I think Cooper Kupp's gotten really old
Fast.
too. I mean, he's essentially a blocker now, and he's had an incredible career, and he was a badass. But it feels like it's over. Stafford, I think there was a stretch last year where he threw a bunch of picks for like a 4 or 5 game. He is leading touchdown drives where he could have thrown 3 picks on him going through guys' hands, and he did that in the Niners game. He did that yesterday. If you remove the Bills game where they scored like 100 points, they played the Saints. That thing was a slugfest till the end. I think it was like 7-7 the majority of the game. The 49ers game was an embarrassment. They won. I'm just saying, for an offensive unit. Last week against the Jets was not very pretty, and last night was pretty ugly. Like offensively, they just have no rhythm. And like you say, it's like their coach has kind of proven he knows what he's doing. And you're watching Stafford play. He definitely looks a little older. When he gets in that mode of throwing it to other guys, I don't know if he gets a little off kilter, but he has a lot of passes, I feel, over the month. And luckily, he throws hard that are just going, and those guys play defense for a reason. If Puka was playing defense, the guy he's throwing, he would have had 10 picks over the last month. And they've gotten lucky. They've dropped a ton.
It's a one-person receiving crew. Tutu Atwell was a bust for the first several years. He gives you about a catch a game. Tyler Johnson's a bounce around the league guy. Robinson, I think it's DeMarcus Robinson. You get about 1 big catch a week. Cooper looks washed. It is incredibly reliant on Puka Nacua. And so to me, they're obviously going to go draft an X-receiver. They need somebody up the sideline badly. They need another offensive tackle. They need a number 1 corner. I feel like they're a draft away from being a really serious team. They're just doing it now with McVay's coaching, Stafford's second half, and Puka Nacua. And I do love the defense. But in fairness, these kids are all young. I mean, everybody's a rookie or a second-year player. There's no age on this defense at all.
I also think these last 2 years are incredible additions to McVay's resume. Like Andy Reid's resume isn't all Super Bowls. It's a lot of like, well, he went 12-5 with Jeff Garcia 1 year in Philadelphia. Like when you do things last year 1-4, or last year 3-6, this year 1-4, and to win the division more than likely back-to-back years is just an awesome job with a bunch of young guys on defense. And like you said, and listen, you get credit for the 3rd-round pick, but they're lucky that Puka is like a top 5 wide receiver. Imagine if he had just been okay, they would be in major trouble.
Okay, so I've been right on Darnold. I got to take a wrong on this. I was always a defender on Kyler Murray because I thought he was a better version talent-wise of Russell Wilson. I thought he was more elusive and threw a better ball. He is historically small. He's 5'8.5". He looks so. If you take the sideline shot when he's in the pocket, sometimes you get the sideline shot. You can't see him. I mean, he's smaller than Tua significantly. No. But in the last 6 games, and this is post-Thanksgiving football, is big boy football. 5 touchdowns, 8 picks, and a passer rating in the 70s. And he's got McBride is an all-world. He's going to be a 10-time All-Pro tight end. Harrison is more than capable. Connor's an excellent running back. The O-line's okay. Not great, but okay. This is not a franchise that's bankrupt of offensive talent. There's players here. And you know what? I think work ethic catches up to you. You can go so long on talent. But John, I've always believed this. Kobe Bryant outworked people. MJ outworked people. There's a lot of guys in this league. Lack of work ethic. Curry is a workaholic. Giannis. Kyler Murray's not. And I've got it pretty connected. And the truth is it's caught up to him, is that the really good defensive coaches, this league punishes you. I mean, you can only coach 20 hours in college. You can just get away with being talented. You can't in the NFL. And I I've said this 2 weeks in a row. I like Kyler. He has a market. If you got him the right team, I think Arizona's going to have a discussion to see if they can move him. I really do.
To me, my takeaway last night was I would ride it out another year and just keep building up the team. But if you are able to unload him for anything of value, I think you could justify it. I mean, he has been a turnover machine down the stretch. Now, on the flip side, I'd go, is this team even that good? I mean, like you said, they do have some offensive pieces, but defensively, the casual football fans, beside Buda Baker, are not going to be able to name a guy. I think the coach has done a
Same.
really good job to just have them
Yeah.
in position all year. I do think it's hard. I do wonder if his market, like, would you just get rid of him for like a third round pick? I think you're better off just
Well,
keeping him. Now, if you could get a high value, like, who
okay,
else are you,
so
like, what else
I've
are you
made
doing?
this argument. I think this year you can get a number one for Garrett Wilson, the Jets. Why? It's a bad draft. It's a really weak draft. I think
It is
I
bad.
think Kyler Murray last year, you're not getting much. Kyler Murray next year, you may not get much. Kyler Murray in this draft, I think you can get a number one. I really do. There's nothing. I mean, listen, every year we have 7 teams that need a quarterback. There's Cam, who will play immediately, and Shedeur will play immediately. There's not another college quarterback that can play. And if the Vikings franchise Darnold, it's Aaron Cousins. I mean, to me, Kyler's going to have a market.
Yeah, he definitely would have a market. I don't know if you get a one because all the crappy teams that need quarterbacks are all drafted high. So would you trade like the 9th pick if you're the Raiders for him? I think you would, if you just need to kind of get a little spark in your organization, would you just give your 2nd round pick, right? Or something. And if you're them, is it just time to pivot off this situation? The irony about last night, I thought was one of his better games. Now, he did throw, the bomb pick that was
Yeah.
maybe a foot too high for Marvin Harrison and a great play. And the last play, it's just, a freaky, unlucky play by both
Right.
guys. I honestly, here's what I will say about him. I had full confidence that he was going to lead him on that they were going to score a touchdown. I was like, the Rams are going to lose
Yeah.
this game. And I thought how he was going to score was one of his classic scrambles. Everyone's in the back of the end zone, and he runs it right in. And when they threw that pick, you're like, God, that has to be deflating because they had him right
Yep.
against the ropes. But that's kind of been his defining characteristic, I would say, this last month. He has just had, turnovers
Yep.
have been a huge part of his game. And it's not like he's throwing up 3 or 4
Here-
touchdowns. That's the one thing with Sam Darnold. Like, he had the pick today, but he also threw
Well,
3 sweet
here's
touchdowns.
the other thing if you're Arizona. He won't age well. He's not a quarterback that's going to age well because like Steph Curry ages well because he'll dribble and shoot forever. Certain guys like Russell Westbrook's age poorly because he's hyper athletic. Cam Newton aged poorly because he was not pre-snap. Cam was about just sheer talent. Big Ben, I thought, aged very quickly. Kyler's going to age quickly. By the way, how many times in that game did he face pressure? That dude does not want to get hit. Kyler,
No.
you can see, he'll trip over his own feet. Like he didn't want to get hit. I had a pass rusher 3 years ago tell me, he goes, I played Kyler Murray. He said, I've never played against the quarterback. This is an elite pass rusher. He goes off the air. He goes, I've never played against the guy. He said, he winces when you hit him. Like he's a baseball player. He doesn't like to get hit at all. Some guys like Burrow's like, hey, it's part of it. Darnold, Andrew Luck,
Mahomes.
I don't care. I want to address this. So I've been talking about this for 2 weeks. 9 teams right now have 4 wins or fewer. Less than half of that last year, 4. This year, it's almost NBA-like. There is a lot of bad football. It is atrocious. We also have 3 13-win teams. So the top is bigger and the bottom's huge. Is it a one-off or is it the reality now of 2 things? The league is now so quarterback-centric that, again, Burrow is the only good quarterback, elite quarterback that's not going to make the playoffs. If you have one, you get in, and Cincinnati may still, but if you have one, you get in. I mean, go look. I'm going to go 7 for 8, I think, potentially, in my division picks. Why? Because I took the best quarterbacks. It's never been easier.
Yeah.
And because of every owner's a billionaire, there's more chaos in ownership. They're more impulsive. They fire people quicker, which creates more chaos. So the bad organizations are worse. Like the Giants have been bad for 6 years. Now it's despite today, it's like, oh my God, this is embarrassing. Chicago's embarrassing. I don't think it's a one-off. I think we're going to have a larger bottom because owners are getting wealthier. writing $48 million to get coaches off the payroll is a rounding error. You used to just stick it out. What do you make of this massive bottom tier now?
I feel like for the last couple decades, the quarterback thing has been pretty true. I think you've been able to get away with it in the 80s and 90s if you built up your team. But I think that's been a pretty consistent theme. Like the shitty teams don't have a
Yeah.
quarterback. That's why they're drafting high. I think the money aspect of it and the ability to fire whoever. And I think on the flip side, you have coaches and executives doing everything humanly possible for power.
Yes.
And I would imagine the league's always been relatively political. But when there is this much money on the line to be a general manager and pay five, I mean, how many gigs in America pay W-2 jobs pay $5 million? An assistant coach as a coordinator makes $2-3 million. They're not the decision maker. They're not near the top of the org chart. They're way down. They don't have any responsibility really beside calling the plays in terms of when shit hits the fan. So I think you have a lot of I think it's much more difficult. We talk about this a lot with players, building a team. I think young people naturally kind of gravitate toward each other and good teams, like everyone's kind of friends. I think coaching is just so corporate. Everyone's trying to take out each other. You can't trust anybody. I think the league, the amount of money that has come in for front office and coaching has made this completely separate from a lot of politicians in the just because you work in the NFL. And I wasn't there long, but I always had this as like once you get there, everyone's such a high level guy. It's just not the case, right? And then the longer I've been around this, knowing a bunch of people with a bunch of teams, you hear these stories. It's just like any industry, when there's a lot of money, the cream will always separate, but people can still make a lot of money being shitty. And how often do we see? I mean, the Atlanta Falcons are about to play. Like McKay runs Arthur Blank's trust, and he like runs the football. But it becomes like these family businesses, but these are billion-dollar businesses. Most family, like I've had some family business, like close personal friends that run family businesses and got bought out for, let's say, 20, $30 million. Like that's an American success story. They built this business, they sold it for 30, $40 million. These people have businesses that are worth not a billion. We're talking like 6, 7. If Mark Davis put the Raiders for sale, I mean, could he get 8? Could he get 9? I mean, how many companies in America are worth this much money? And the Raiders are a good example. They've always had these people that like leech their way in because it's just like a money train. I think it's hard for some of these owners. I mean, we look at all the bad teams. It's all these owners that are listening to the
Yeah.
wrong people. But you know who Steve Bisciotti listens to? DaCosta, Ozzie, and Harbaugh. You know who the Yorks listen to? John and Kyle. It's like I think the Chiefs, Andy and Veach, are very simple. They operate like a small business. These others start operating like Fortune 500 companies where I want in on the board of directors. I got an idea for you. The kids are involved, and it just becomes Wackoville. And obviously, because it's so public and it's a fun thing, it's why Kevin Warren has a seven-figure job. But you know what? His job, no one cares when he sells PSLs or sells the naming rights deal for hundreds of millions of dollars. No one will give a shit. But you know what people care about? Your third round pick, the offensive coordinator. And so when you start getting involved with that, and I think that has permeated all over the league, or at least, all these crappy teams. And I think they struggle with that. And these owners have money. Everyone's just trying to leech on. Because the money right now is, I mean, it's like outrageous. I mean, it's crazy. If you could bring back Lamar Hunt and Al Davis and Eddie DeBartolo, and I would have told these guys in the 80s what this would become, and no one could have foreseen what it has become. I mean, we've seen it come in the last decade, but 40 years, when I was a kid, football, I mean, the salary cap at one point in time, I think when it first started, wasn't it like $30-40 million? I mean, that was 30 years ago. John Madden was being paid $8 million, making more than like all the players.
The blockbuster hit Call of Duty Black Ops 6 delivers an unrivaled high-octane gameplay experience across multiplayer, zombies, and Call of Duty Warzone. The Black Ops 6 era is here, and it's ready to wreak havoc. During this holiday season, dive into an immersive gameplay experience with your friends and your family. Enjoy high-octane multiplayer maps with triumphant return of round-based zombies, and don't miss Area 99, the new Call of Duty Warzone map. The action never stops. New maps, modes, events, more included with every free seasonal content update. Ring in the holiday season with Black Ops 6 and dive into new festive game modes and events and maps, including Nuketown Holiday, brand new zombie maps, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, Groundbreaking, blockbuster, hit of the year. You do not want to miss it. This holiday season, give the gift that keeps on giving with Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Check your online and local retailers. Limited time holiday deals today.
Rated M for mature.
So I want to touch on a couple of college things. So Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders in a very weak class are going to go 1 and 2. Shedeur did not play terribly well against BYU. They got run. Cam Ward, I would have skipped the bowl game instead of play the first half, not play the second, just because if I would have played poorly, I would have wanted to play the second half. I don't think it will affect. Listen, if you need a quarterback, you're going to draft. I don't think it has any effect on Cam Ward's draft status. Do you?
No, I pay zero, and I think most people in the NFL, non-playoff bowl games are pretty meaningless. Whether you want to play, whether you play, no one gives a shit. I would disagree. I don't think he's a lock to be the second pick by any means.
Well, I think Shedeur and Cam will be the top 2 quarterbacks taken.
Oh, gotcha. I just don't know. Like 1 and 2, I think this draft is very up in the air. Unlike last year, where it was pretty clear, guys, quarterbacks.
So I think New England's got the number 1 pick. I think somebody will trade up to number 1 just out of fear. I mean, Tennessee now.
You know what I would do if I was them, Colin? Wouldn't you just take Travis Hunter and just try to get some positive momentum?
Yeah,
he looks like a generational prospect.
That's what I would do.
I mean, just don't overthink it. Get the guy, and just obviously you could make a trade back, but is it one of those times just take Travis Hunter and just move on and put a smile on everyone's face?
Well, if I was, let's say, for instance, the Giants, who are now 3rd or 4th in the draft, wanted to move up, and Tennessee is 2nd, I could see both those teams taking quarterbacks. I could see New England saying, okay, we'll move back no later than 3rd. No later than 3rd, especially if somebody moves up to take a quarterback. If he's one of these 4 or 5 teams, like New Orleans could take a quarterback, Las Vegas is taking a quarterback, then I'd feel good. But I do think the player to take for New England is probably Travis Hunter. I think he's electric. This is a team for 4 years running, just doesn't have playmakers. He's a playmaker on both sides. I think Cam is the better athlete with a bigger arm, and I think you could talk yourself into him being number 1. He's got a little bit of an edge to him, I've been told, but, whatever. Shedeur's more polished. I don't think either is an A prospect. I don't think either one of them is Caleb, Jaden Daniels. I don't think either one of them, I like throwing the ball as well as Michael Penix. How do you view him as a former NFL scout? I think they're B-plus prospects.
Yeah, I would say Cam is the more physically gifted guy. Shedeur, I think, is the better player, but Shedeur has a little bit, and maybe it's just the team he was on, but we've seen this carry over for Caleb, holds on to the ball a little long. Now, granted, I would too, to try to wait for some of my wide receivers to get open. One thing I will say about Shedeur is over the course of his couple years in Colorado, and I didn't watch much of BYU. I had it on a second TV, but every time I looked up, he was getting killed. He's tough. He can handle it. I think Cam Ward's grades are going to be all over the map. I think he's going to be a pretty fascinating prospect. I think when the dust settles, probably if I was a betting man, Shedeur ends up going number 1 overall, especially if New England, obviously they're not going to take him, but trades back a couple spots. I could see Cam Ward going anywhere from 2 to like 10. I think he is going to be a polarizing prospect. I think Travis Hunter, and I'm sure you've heard this too, consistent theme. We've seen some drafts recently with like the Penei Sewells and Jamar Chases and Micah Parsons and just some elite players drafted in the top 15. I don't think this draft's viewed as like Hall of Famers everywhere up top. I've been told you could be drafting at 18 and get the same player the dude that drafts at 4 gets. Even last year, like it was pretty clear at the top, a lot of good players. This draft is not viewed like that at all. I mean, there's not left tackle that I don't think anyone views as
my
like
favorite
Johnson
player,
Trent Williams.
My can't miss player is not Travis Hunter, because I think if he comes in and wants to be a receiver, but he's a better corner, it could go sideways. The best player I've seen in college football is Mason Graham, the defensive tackle for Michigan. I think he is a 10-year All-Pro. I think Mason Graham's the best player. I think that receiver from Arizona, T-Mac, McMillan, is a can't-bust player. I think the corner from Michigan, Will Johnson, is not going to miss. I think I think 2 of the 3 best players. I think even Kelvin Banks, the Texas tackle, I could see him coming in and just being okay. I think there's a lot of
LSU tackle too. I think people like him, but they don't love him.
I think Travis Hunter. I mean, I think Shedeur and Cam are as good as where they land. I think if Shedeur lands with a team, like for instance, let's say Shedeur, the Raiders now with another win probably won't get him. And I don't think Telesco loves either one of these quarterbacks. I don't know that, but I just knowing, that he drafted Herbert and what he looks for in terms of size and mobility is neither one of these guys to me feels like that.
No.
Mason Graham's the best player. Will Johnson, the corner, Michigan. T-Mac, the Arizona kid. I think it was a down year for the SEC. I think we have to be totally honest about this. Is Georgia now? I mean, Georgia doesn't have Carson Beck. I think they're very beatable. Jesus, USC beat 8-4 LSU and 8-4 Texas A&M. I mean, and everybody out here has Lincoln Riley getting whacked. It's like, I don't think the SEC, I don't think it's your typical year. In fact, my two favorite players right now in college football in terms of talent are Caleb Downs for Ohio State and the receiver for Ohio State, Smith. Those to me are the two.
Yeah, and they're not even draft eligible.
I mean, to me, if they were draft eligible, and I'm not joking when I say this, in a bad quarterback year, if you didn't need a quarterback, like New England, they would take that wide receiver from Ohio State. And I think who's taking number 2 right now? Tennessee probably needs a quarterback. If a team didn't need a quarterback in this draft, I would take those 2 Ohio State players over every single player in this draft. I'm dead serious.
Yeah, I think Texas has a couple players, number 11, that's an underclassman that's not eligible. I mean, so I think some of their best players are not draft eligible. That's, good thing if you're Sark. I think the tight end at Penn State is pretty damn good. Tyler Warren.
Warren. Tyler
Warren. Warren, yeah. Number 44. Yeah. He's the real deal. I think one thing, if we look at, we're big AFC West guys, Denver and the Chargers, they need a running back, right? Young running back. It is a great running back class.
Let me throw one at you. And he'll probably be a 5th-round running back. And I don't want to sound like a homer. Woody Marks at USC is today I went and looked at the top 20 running backs in this class. They had this kid at like 14. And I'm like, holy shit. He is the best running back USC has had. I'm serious. Since Reggie. He can catch, he can block, he can run. And they had him listed, I think, 14th or 15th best running back in the country. I'm glad you brought this up. It is the best running back draft I can remember in years.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with, obviously Genty, all-time great season, but he's 5'8", and it's like, okay, you're going to take him pick 17 or 22 when you could just take your starting running back the following round and get a corner or get a linebacker or get a better player. And that's where I think I was watching the Holiday Bowl. Syracuse had a kid. I'm like, this guy's really good. Every team
Carolina,
you watch, Iowa, Washington, every team just has an NFL back, and they physically look it. They're just jacked. Most of them are 210 to 220. They break tackles. They get downhill. This running back class, that's the one thing I've heard. Absolutely stacked with NFL. The Chargers and the Broncos, you watch both those two teams. I mean, I know Jim, but I even think Denver, they will take a running back on the second day, in the second or third round. And if they hit, that could change both those two offenses.
Okay, so we're going to have great quarterfinal games. We'll wrap it up with this. I'll take Penn State close over Boise State close. What say you?
I like Penn State pretty big, and I think they beat them by double
I'll
digits.
take Texas over Arizona State comfortably, couple of touchdowns.
Yeah, I think that's a massive talent mismatch. Tough draw for ASU.
I think Ohio State beats Oregon by about a touchdown. I don't know if the time off for a young Oregon team helped. I'll take the Buckeyes.
I'm going to take Oregon here. I think everyone's going Ohio State. I think we're going to overreact a little bit. And listen, that game, they just got their ass kicked by Michigan. I think people are sleeping on Oregon. Best team start to finish. Rose Bowl. It's going to feel like, the Rose Bowl we all grew up on. I like Oregon in that game.
Notre Dame, Georgia. I think.
Do it.
I'm going to take Notre Dame.
Same.
Yeah, I think it's close.
Yeah. Georgia hasn't been very good this year. I mean, for their standards. I mean, they have been a shell of what they've been. That's still good.
I think Notre Dame, explosive in the run game. Everybody's making fun of me. I like Riley Leonard. I think he's cleaned his act up. I think he came there and he was raw. I don't think he's as raw. I think he's going to get drafted in the 4th or 5th round in the NFL this year. It's a very weak quarterback draft. I think Riley Leonard will go somewhere, but you don't have to have a great quarterback. I'm not a huge Ewers fan. I'm not a big Will Howard fan. I think Dylan Gabriel's good, not an NFL quarterback. I think Riley Leonard's good enough to win a national championship. I do.
Yeah, I actually think Penn State, I think Aller and that team, I think Notre Dame and Penn State are very similar. They're going to run the ball down your throat and play defense. And if their quarterbacks just play solid, I think both those two teams can win this whole thing, where most people, I think, are going to pick Georgia, Oregon, Ohio State. But I think people are sleeping on Notre Dame and Penn State. Running the ball, defense, historically that wins in the NFL. A little different. These games are all neutral site, nice, weather, which I would say neutralizes their strength. But I think Penn State, I could see Penn State going on a little run here.
I would love it. I talk about the draft. Carter, that rush end they have, that dude can play. He's a top 6 or 7 player.
He's good.
Yeah, he's really good.
Yeah, he's good.
All right, John Middlekauff, the former NFL scout. His podcast is 3 and Out, hardest working guy in this business. As always, buddy, great talking to you.
See you later this week.
I judge the quality of a fragrance by the compliments you get. When I wore Ovation for the first time, second time, and third time, usually I walk past somebody and they're like, hey, what you got on? Who over there smelling good? That's the injection of confidence right there to you.
That's right. We want to be at the forefront of using the brand as a gateway for these young athletes. Custom suit, we do a photo shoot, we do video, and it's all about that partnership to create a personal brand.
And I love you guys associating it with more sophistication. Throwing a suit on a kid, sometimes it takes for you to see yourself with a suit on in the mirror to be like, hey, I have more to offer.
Ovation for Men, we're part of Amazon's Black Business Accelerator. Amazon has invested $150 million for the next 4 years to uplift small businesses like myself to scale. Amazon is really putting their money where their mouth is.
They're committed to excellence on every level. They want to scale these businesses to be amongst the best in whatever industry they're in.
You've always been authentic. You've always been pushing excellence.
Well, I appreciate that.
As our slogan says, every man deserves an ovation.
Yes, sir.
Listen, this relationship with Ovation for Men, Richard Sherman, The Volume, this is just the beginning.
I appreciate you guys letting me be a part of your journey. If you haven't already checked them out, go out there, get your man some. And get the sport too. And it can be Christmas, birthday, holidays, or yesterday. But make sure you get it.